Hey everyone, just a quick heads up from producer Jake. Our audio file for this episode was corrupted, but we were able to recover it. The sound might be a little off here and there, but the content is solid and we think you'll still enjoy it.
All right, welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You've got Logan Jones here with Evan Knowles, reporting out of the Hunsicker Venture Studio. Today we're joined by Sam Razor, who was the founder and CEO of Hippo Manager, which was acquired by, I know I'm going to blank on the name. I'll let you go and fill it in for us, Sam.
Mission Vet Partners and Southern Vet Partners.
We'll dive more into that story. I don't even know why I asked you in the beginning because I knew I was going to forget it before I even got to the intro. But we're excited to sit down with you, Sam. You've got one of the cooler stories from Lexington startup ecosystem having gone through an acquisition. You know, that's something that's always exciting to hear about. So we're looking forward to learning more about that, learning more about Hippo Manager, and also learning more about Parasite Systems, which you're currently helping out over there, another startup in the same space. So before we get started, we just want to get a word from our sponsors.
Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Middle Tech is also supported by Hunsicker, an impact venture studio based in Lexington, Kentucky. Hunsicker is creating companies out of the ordinary by founding and funding the next generation of purpose-driven startups. They partner with founders to create indispensable solutions to the world's most fundamental problems. On a quarterly basis, they host an invite-only intimate gathering called Fireside Convos, where attendees representing a wide network of stakeholders in the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem discuss timely topics, including the role of AI for startups out of Kentucky and the challenges of identifying and attracting talent. To be considered as a guest, visit hunsicker.co/fireside to apply. Middle Tech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with.
All right, Sam. The question that I like leading off these podcasts with is kind of a goofy question. I like asking founders how they would describe their startup to their mom. So for Hippo Manager, how would you tell your mom what you're doing with that?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. This weekend, I was talking to my dad with my oldest daughter, and we were talking about founding the company, and he led with he was against it. So, you know, it was to how I would characterize it to my mom, or would be a case management system for veterinarians. She was a speech pathologist and managed students that way, and she had kind of case management software. So that's why I would go that route with it.
Yeah, that makes it easy to understand. You bring your vet in, they need to go to the vet, and your vet becomes case. Then the veterinary clinic and assume Hippo Manager would just help manage that patient, as it were.
Exactly. Yeah, we did everything from medical records to clinic inventory to point of sale system, appointment scheduling, client communications. Really, the whole thing. Way too many things. That. It's always advice I give folks that are thinking about starting a platform is much more narrow scope than what we did.
For sure.
So difficult.
During our intro call, I think one of the interesting things to talk about with Hippo Manager is you and your co-founder got some exposure into the space, and you noticed that a lot of the industry was still on-prem software, and that was kind of where you initially saw the opportunity with Hippo Manager. So let's back up even before that. Talk a little bit about your background and how you came to be building a software company in the veterinary space.
Sure. So like most software founders, I've got a degree in political science. That was how I got through college, but really was set out, wanted to be like in health IT. So undergrad, Went to grad school and got my master's in public administration with a focus on healthcare delivery. But my first job out of college was a veterinary practice management software company in for sales. It was an on-prem system. Started working support there, and that's actually where I met my co-founder. So we worked there together for a couple of years. Before that, I left the veterinary space and built cloud-based case management systems for a justice agency, and really moved up and out of technology there into executive management and helped run the national office for that agency. But ultimately missed technology. And Bart and I, when we were working together at DVM, always wanted to do something. And, when we started talking about it, we're shocked that in the time that I'd left DVM Manager, that the competitive landscape hadn't changed. It was still all on-prem systems. So
I want to just, for anybody that doesn't understand what on-prem versus cloud software means, if you wouldn't mind just kind of getting a high level.
Sure.
The differences there.
Yeah, so, on-prem is going to be a server that they have physically, like at the vet practice, that they have to maintain and patch and support and all that sort of stuff, versus a cloud-based solution, which is through your browser where you can access it from any internet-connected device. So the veterinary industry is very resistant to change, and they also don't enjoy having server-based systems. I can't tell you how many times when we were talking about migrating their data from their server, they didn't know where it was in the clinic. It wouldn't have a monitor hooked up to it. One clinic, they had their server under their hot water heater. Which is, I can't think of a worse place for a computer person. It hates both of those things. But yeah, so that's the big difference, maintaining that server, all your local network connectivity, all of the security settings, all of that stuff is tied up in the on-prem versus cloud is you have a vendor like Hippo Manager. It's all that for you.
What made the veterinarian space so either adverse or slow to adopt technology? Was it a lot of fragmentation, kind of mom and pop kind of deal, or what are some of the dynamics there?
Yeah, so it's an interesting market because it's incredibly fragmented. It's still fragmented. It kind of goes through cycles of acquisition about every 7 to 10 years. The kind of powers that be would acquire these softwares and then run them as independent business units. They would never migrate or consolidate customers onto a single platform. So even though two companies effectively controlled 60, 70% of the market, it was divided up between like 17 different products that were owned by those two groups. So it was both consolidated and fragmented at the same time. They would use, one of those was a lab company that would bundle their lab services software. So they would incentivize folks not to change software with heavy discounts on their lab services. And then the other was a inventory supply distributor who did kind of the same thing. So folks were adverse to change, but then they were also incentivized by reducing their COGS, cost of goods on other services that they provide to not move. So it kind of took a sticky product because it's very disruptive to change, and then made it even more sticky with financial incentives.
Yeah, interested. And so, how did you begin to penetrate that market and kind of displace some of those really sticky systems? Did you have any early tactics or product development tactics that really came into play?
Yeah, so one of the problems that makes it so hard to disrupt that space is those products have been around forever. So they're fully featured. They're ugly. They look like they're from the 90s because they are. But at the same time, getting people to switch to something new, it's not going to have a lot of the functionality just because it's so broad. So one thing that we did was we tried to have some minimal functionality in all those spaces. So we kind of identified our product as being a composition of about 9 different products that we had to get to before we could effectively compete. And then the way we went at it was really aggressive pricing. So one of the other kind of things that they had done over time was they had pushed the price up on those really outdated systems. So to keep people out, they were using the discount, but they were also had a high price point on those things. So we really competed from a functionality standpoint where you could log in anywhere, but also coupling it with low cost, which was a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And when it came to actually building the first version of the product, how did you know what needed to be built? So you mentioned those 9 features there. Did that come from your experience working in the space prior, or was there some sort of talking to customers when you were first building it that kind of led to knowing what to build? How did you go about that?
Yeah, it was really from our experience, Bart and I's experience working at DVM Manager and working support. Like we talked about frequently, I don't know how anybody could get into this space effectively without having lived and breathed it for a long time. So that was really important for us in that space to really know the ins and outs of like what worked and what didn't work and what people liked. So we were able to use that to really kind of hone in on what we felt like were the major pain points. Some of our early investors really wanted to push us in other directions that seemed like they make a lot of sense to drive like clinic profitability and that sort of stuff, those types of features. But those just wouldn't move the needle. The thing that would like really move the needle for folks was being able to get done with their notes and kind of charts so they could go home. Because a lot of the practices, what they would do is they would see patients all day long in 15 to 30 minute blocks and then sit down at the end of the day when the clinic closed and go back and do all their medical notes. So they would be there an extra 3-4 hours. So really focusing on the point of care side, capturing information faster and easier was way more important to them than generating revenue. Which was partly because we targeted kind of the small independent vet practices. It was kind of interesting. At the same time we were launching and going, there was another cloud-based product out of New Zealand. So we really went at the bottom of the market, the small practices, independent practices, the low price point. They went at the top of the market. So big practices, extremely expensive. It was kind of a natural experiment that just kind of happened. And we both got to the end. They did a lot better than we did. I talked to that founder, and he had said that he wishes he would have done it our way. I'm just like, it's pretty clear you did it the right way. So, like, we got there, but it's what you did was the right way. Now, it took him a lot longer.
Yeah.
He got about a 7-year jump on us. So, maybe if we would have ran it out another 7 years, we would have been right. But we were ready for exit when the exit opportunity came.
You alluded to it briefly there. Did you have?
I had a quick point I want to make because I think you have a good kind of anecdote on this as well. I really don't understand how you would be an effective entrepreneur if you did not have industry experience like what you did. And I really can't imagine a better role to be than support because you're hearing all the problems that are being faced by those people. And Evan, I wanted to just toss that over to you really quick because I remember when you were starting Simba back when it was Touchbase, I think is what you called it back then. Didn't you go try to get a job as like a community manager in an apartment or something? I know you're.
Well, I had owned properties, and so I knew the problem personally. But then I wanted to kind of get even deeper into much larger properties, which we were originally kind of targeting, and was looking at just getting a job to get in the weeds of understanding what software they were using. So I think there's all kinds of tactics you can use, but I mean, obviously personal experience kind of trumps all, but then there's all kinds of different layers to what that experience can tell.
I just think that's a very tactical piece of advice for any younger people who think they want to be entrepreneurs. And it's like, I'm curious about this industry. I'm interested in this industry. Don't go and just start a business immediately without any knowledge. Go and get yourself a job. A support job is a great way to hear about the problems that people within that industry are facing. So I just think that's a point worth kind of pulling out there.
That is a really interesting tactic, is to be like, I love this industry. Let me go find one of the leaders, be able to support team and be in the mud of like all of the complaints and then take the complaints and be like, okay, here's a different way to do this, which sounds kind of like what you did.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't intentional, but it worked out really well. And like, I cannot imagine trying to get into a space without that kind of work experience. And I mean, frankly, was in my mid 30s, early 30s, when we started Hippo, I was post working, for a long time out of school, post-master degree, that sort of thing. And it was a lot of lessons learned in the hard way. Somebody coming just like straight out trying to start in an industry that they haven't worked in, that they don't know. People do it all the time. But it seems overwhelming to me because like I leaned on so much of that like personal experience. I can't imagine the additional iterative cycles you'd have to survive to get there.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, you alluded to investors earlier, them waiting maybe for you to go a different direction. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit here in a second, but how did you capitalize the business and what was your approach? Because I think you bootstrapped for a while and then you decided to raise. So talk about, how you did it and maybe some advice to listeners on, what you learned about fundraising and takeaways.
Sure. Yeah, so we did. We bootstrapped it for about the first 3 years, which was hard, but really got us to where getting funded was much easier. At that point, we were in market, in revenue, that sort of thing, which was still challenging because our TAM, total addressable market, isn't huge. It was a kind of a niche software that really had strategic value in a much larger market. But looking for investors, that part was a little challenging to kind of educate them on that, on what the end could actually look like. I think we were very fortunate. We had fantastic investors that really were very supportive. They helped us in a lot of different ways, not just with cash, but also worked. They didn't interfere, or we didn't have any acrimony or any sort of stuff like that, which, you hear horror stories from other founders on. We got to skip all that. I think for a couple of reasons. One, we were SaaS, which over the last 10 years has been a very investable area. We're animal health, which has also been super popular for investment in the last 10, 15 years. And so we had a couple of kind of market infrastructure things in our favor that made getting funded that way more palatable. We also had folks that were interested in investing that we passed on because we just culturally didn't feel like that was going to be a good fit for us. We stayed away from basically the coasts from funding because of those kinds of concerns. And we were able to because of the area that we were in was so interesting nationally. There's not many markets out there that have grown through the last three recessions, which the vet industry has. So that's especially when things started getting tough in different areas, and we were like COVID is a great example. COVID was really hard for most everyone. It was an absolute boon for the vet industry. Everybody adopted pets. Everybody was home. One thing that you don't think of is when you're home with your pet all day, every day, anything that they do that's weird, you notice. You would have never noticed before. So the number of visits went up, the number of pets went up, and just all of the things went up. Well, there were some logistical problems that some folks had, not being able to go into clinics and that sort of stuff. But those all kind of contributed to our fundraising.
Yeah.
And not all good. One of those things, we were actually looking at an exit in March 2020. I was down kind of at my final meeting with a group in Atlanta. It was close enough to the world shutting down that we were bumping elbows instead of shaking hands. I came home on that Tuesday. That Friday was the announcement that everything was locking down. I got a call the next Monday that they weren't making any moves. They were going to be supporting their existing portfolio until the dust settles. And we hadn't raised prior to that in prep for the exit, basically. So we went into the shutdown in a less than ideal cash position that we were then able to, our investors were able to support us and, make sure that we got through that without any problems. But it could have been bad. Actually.
Yeah, a lot of local investors. That sound like you went regional versus coast.
We did, yeah. A lot of local, a lot of Midwest.
Nice.
I think we had one investor out of Denver. I think that was the farthest west we went, and we had Chicago and Michigan.
So you got M25 in there, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, M25. They were a phenomenal investor, and not just from the money standpoint. They hold Founders Summit twice a year. That it's basically like professional development for founders. You go up and you can speed date other investors. They bring in like 80 different early stage investors. We met several groups out of that invested. That was hugely helpful. But then the second day was they would kick the money out, and the founders, they'd have kind of a forum, some sessions, and then just kind of open the floor so that folks could connect and talk. And it was just hugely valuable. As a founder, you're kind of on an island, and you don't get to commiserate or talk through those things without fear of other repercussions. So
yeah, Victor and his team have done a good job with M25. I like him a lot. He comes down to Cincinnati and Kentucky. He's got a few portfolio companies down in Kentucky, and I've seen him at several events, and I like him a lot. His team's great. And then, Bluegrass Angels were there.
Yep.
Dan Beldy. So you get a lot of familiar names that are great for the community that we're blessed to have around here.
Yeah, Bluegrass Angels, KSTC.
Yeah,
Key Horse, yeah. Now, Commonwealth Seed Capital, Dan Beldy, Awesome Inc. Those just, if there was a local resource, we leaned on.
I looked at the cap, I looked at your Crunchbase and PitchBook, and I'm like, this is a great cap table for a Lexington company. It's everybody that you would want locally. That's great for the community. Yeah. What was, you said not necessarily went to the coast because maybe their incentives aligned differently. You mentioned this was like a limited TAM. When you go to the coast, they're looking for certain timelines, certain scale up. And so I guess there was just a misalignment. Like, how would you advise founders on finding that alignment and considering going to the coast versus kind of staying local?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to give any kind of like generalizable advice on that. But making sure your expectations are aligned and realistic. For us, one of the things that we would talk to folks that weren't familiar with the space, and they would just be like, we had a lot of good data that practices that switched to us. They would see a 22% bump in top line revenue in the first year they switched to us, regardless of their practice size. It's huge. And literally no practice care. Nobody would care about that. But when we would talk to investors and stuff, they would be like, with that kind of data, you should be able to double the size of your business every year. No problem. You should be 10x. And we would just be like, that's just not how it just doesn't matter. We've thrown everything at it. And we would grow, consistently, 80 to 120% year over year. But, everybody wants the logarithmic growth and that sort of thing. And we just couldn't move it off that. And if we would have brought in somebody that was expecting that kind of growth, because when we knew our market, we knew what was realistic, that that's all that's going to result in is me getting pushed out. And I wasn't interested in that.
Yeah. And how much did you end up raising in total?
About $7 million.
$7 million. Nice. Well, as we kind of work towards just talking about some of the learnings from both building the company and the acquisition itself. One of the things that we talked about on the call that we had before this was trying to hire sales leadership. So you kind of mentioned scaling things up from there. Just give us the story on how that went down and what you kind of learned from it.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, hiring sales leadership, I think, was one of the hardest, most challenging parts of the whole journey. Running a sales team, I think one thing, at least in our case, I was able to be pretty effective in selling. I'm not really a good salesperson, but, founders, they know the product, they know the customer. You're obviously very motivated. A huge part of sales is just personal conviction that comes through magically somehow, and that works really well. So trying to hand that off to somebody else was hard. We hired our first sales director, came from a large company, Lexmark. We knew it was going to be pretty dicey going from that type of corporate environment to a startup. That was our biggest concern talking to him. He was a good guy. He did some really good things. Ultimately wasn't a great fit long term. He relocated, and we were looking for another person. And then we had a couple of misfires on the next couple of candidates. One of the things that I learned through that was I'm not good at hiring sales leadership. That's batting 330 may be good at baseball, but it's not in hiring leadership. So ultimately, I reached out to M25, who connected me with a search firm that helped us do the next hire on that. And it was expensive, and it was worth every penny. They did a great job of helping us find, Kim London, who I can't find enough nice things to say about working with Kim, not just because she was successful in her role, but just as a person. And any good salesperson or any salesperson that's got any ability at all can sell themselves, and kind of weeding through that is difficult. Some people are able to do it. I had to get help to do it.
Yeah. And I guess reflecting back on this, and this is probably not necessarily something you can generalize for all positions, but what was it specifically for Hippo Manager when it came to finding sales leadership? Was it somebody that had more domain experience? Was it somebody that was very organized and systems oriented, or kind of where did you find the most value shine through for pursuing that model?
Yeah, so really we started looking for folks that had a successful track record in sales, B2B sales, not domain specific. That just didn't work in our space. Kim had started as a vet tech and a practice manager. She had great success selling. I think she was an early employee at a company that had grown to be one of the monsters in our space. I think she was under employee number 10. So she had really done all the things. She'd been in the clinic. She had been in an early stage company. She had helped scale them up to several thousand employees by the time that we were able to lure her away. But, tracking them down, and, really good salespeople, they're not available because they're good at it and they're worth more than their weight in gold, and right. Companies want to hang on to them. So finding, it's so hard because you want to find somebody available quickly and that sort of thing. And you may be able to find somebody, I wasn't, that's going to be in that situation, and everybody's life circumstances are different. You get lucky. But really, I think most of the time you're going to have to lure them away from somebody else, which gets complicated with non-competes and all the things out there.
No doubt. We were kind of talking before you record. Startup that I was with before at Sales River, It's just finding somebody that is kind of that exact perfect fit. It's just challenging. I mean, it's just, there's so much that you kind of have to consider with that, and find it, like you mentioned, finding somebody who's available that is a good fit is just even more. Especially, I thought we talked on this podcast, so it's like you want to find them in Lexington ideally, where they're in office with you, but that, I mean, you're really limiting yourself at that point.
Yeah, we went through that same struggle, and our first couple were here local, and then Kim actually almost as far as where you can be in the United States. She's in Washington State, and so she got to run things remotely from there. But
Nice.
What did you learn about timing of sales hires? So like at what point in the business should a founder move from founder-led sales to I'm going to bring in a sales leader?
Yeah, so for us, we made that decision when we were able to kind of sell into clinics successfully, and not like wheeling and dealing, we had like a sales plan, our pricing kind of settled, and it was like a regular kind of cadence.
Like something repeatable.
Yeah. Exactly. And that was when we decided to go out and look. And I feel like from a product standpoint, we were on the early edge, but ready when we did that, making sure that we could support customers as they came on too, was part of the concern. We didn't want to be about signing customers, them having either a bad experience with the product or bad experience with service, and that kind of limiting sales going forward. So we really used service as a differentiator. So that was challenging. It's a challenging timing balancing act on that.
Yeah. And then I'm guessing that eventually worked out well and you started to scale. And then, we spoke about it earlier at the top of the podcast, you had an exit. So talk about what led up to that exit, what made it the right time, what made you want to do it. Talk about kind of the early beginnings of that and it ended up happening.
Yeah. So my co-founder and I, when we started Hippo, we had exit in mind. I mean, that was always the goal. It was never going to be like a business that we passed down to kids or anything like that. So we had a number in mind when we started. We actually had 3 separate offers, serious offers prior to actually exiting. And we kept kind of moving the goalposts. We got to the first one and we're like, I think we can go bigger. And then the second one, we're like, we can still go bigger. The third one, we had to get the wives together and everybody sit down and really go through it and make sure that we wanted to keep running it. And then the last time we were just like, and we just felt like we just couldn't. Trying to go larger than that was, the risk was going to outweigh the likelihood.
Yeah, and when you're getting offers like that, one, I'm sure it's very exciting, validating. Somebody wanting to pay you a lump of cash for your business. What do you turn towards as a founder to turn down an offer like that? Is it just looking at the numbers that you guys are doing and where the growth goes from there? I mean, that's got to be something where you just have to put faith in what you build and know that it's going to continue going.
Yeah, we looked at it, from a capital raising dilution, kind of dilution versus exit scenario. Frequently, that was part of it. One of those offers was from a group that we just didn't feel good about turning the business over to, both from the team internally and also the customers. Just kind of philosophically, we didn't have a great alignment with that group, and that was important to us. So that was kind of how we worked through those. Most of it was math on just what we were looking for, this versus another raise, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then also kind of cultural fit.
And talk us through kind of the process of going through an acquisition. So somebody comes, they say, we're interested in this. I believe you said you hired an investment bank to kind of help you with that process. But from both what actually goes on and kind of timeline, just tell people that, aren't familiar with what it means to go through an acquisition, from the time it started until your earn out period. Just kind of walk us through what happens and how long all that takes.
Sure. Yeah. So really that third offer that we got is what really kind of spurred us to go get a banker for the next one. It was that was probably one of the best decisions that we made. The whole time was to get somebody to help with that. We spent about 8 months working with the banker on just getting the business ready, getting everything in place. Then they ran a process where they solicited interest, and then they managed that to sell the negotiation and sell of it. And they did a much better job on the negotiation and kind of making sure that we got what we were looking for out of it and exceeded expectations on that. And it's really so all-consuming to do that I would not recommend trying to do it on your own. I mean, I don't think you could effectively manage and run your business and do that at the same time, because it's just so much. I mean, even just providing all the documentation and getting everything ready and going through those diligence prep cycles, not doing it yourself was still a big distraction. So I think that's something that I would highly recommend on somebody that's really looking to sell, something that is going to be, we were never going to be an EBITDA transaction. So there was a lot of art in what the final sales price was going to be, because it was a strategic value, not necessarily, just a straight multiple against profitability. And
I had much smaller but similar situation. Did not use an investment banker. What point does an investment banker make sense, and what point will they be like, no, it's not interesting? You might not know the answer, but what in somebody's mind might be listening to this is in a similar situation, say, yeah, maybe I'll engage an investment banker. What level or what stage of the business or size would you say makes a good fit?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when we were looking for a banker, we spoke to several that were like, we only do huge deals. And, this is, you've got a nice thing going here, but like, that's, not what we do. I feel like this is an infomercial for M25, but Victor and Mike, they connected us. They had a portfolio company that exited, and they were like, they worked with these guys. They were great. We talked to them, and really worked really well with, and they did a good job. So, I think some of that is, if you're raising money, if you have been able to raise money from folks that have a portfolio of companies that have had exits, really use their experience, because they know who will take the kind of deals in that kind of range that you're looking at. Because when we were out just looking for folks, it was going to be tough to find the right fit. So
yeah, I think the thing that bothered me the most about doing it myself was the negotiation. Yeah, I was like, if you're doing it, there's not a third party that's outside of the emotions and the understanding of the product and what you might perceive the market. A third party is going to look at it much more objectively, and I feel like that was one area where I look back and say maybe that it should have gotten other people involved beyond our attorney and finance auditors and such, because I just did all of it myself. And you're right, like it's a lot. It's hard to run your business and do that.
Yeah, hats off to you.
And again, I'm sure it wasn't nearly as big as an acquisition, but similar situation is strategic acquisition. I have an equity-backed company and did it myself. So I definitely kind of understand what you.
Yeah, hats off. I wouldn't do it again. I don't think I could have got it across the line doing it myself, because this is it may be a little strange, and my wife would probably disagree, but I am somewhat risk averse. So one thing that was always super helpful for me was like I would go through the deck and all the time, even when we were raising money and like running those numbers and everything still makes sense. Like we're still doing these things at this clip, and I found that to be very, very reassuring. But if it came down to it, I'm going to get that deal done and probably sell myself short because just like emotionally, like I'm just like, get it done.
Yeah, there were components of that, and frankly, we just didn't have any leverage.
Yeah,
Negotiation. Like if we didn't have the acquisition, I mean, there was going to be that solvent business there that's going to completely run out of cash because there wasn't fundraising on the other side that was going to make sense. So
yeah.
there's definitely a lot of dynamics to it, and I definitely would probably tell somebody that comes to me and I was like, hey, should I involve somebody outside of myself in this? I would say yeah. So it's good to hear that you did.
Yeah. One of the other things, like we did a lot of things right, but we were also very fortunate from a timing standpoint. So I mentioned the New Zealand competitor earlier, and they got acquired about 4 months before our deal closed. And really at that point, there are a lot of kind of big players in the market that saw the strategic value that participated in the process. And when they came off the table, it really changed the tenor of the conversation because there wasn't another day left at the dance of any significant scale.
Yeah.
So they did us a huge solid by also being acquired.
Nice. Talk about the process of going through the earnout. So you get the deal done. You agree to terms. I guess I don't even know this part of it. You only get the capital or the cash once your earnout is over. Is that correct? You have to go through that process. Kind of talk us through for people like myself that might not understand that full part.
Sure. So there's lots of ways to structure an earnout. There's everything from having performance metrics to just retention to everything in between. We had a very founder friendly earnout for both me and my co-founder. So it was it's a real change going from being a founder to being part of a very large organization. So I think as if you're going through that process to really take a hard look at like what you're going into next, and what their goals are, what their goals may be that aren't getting verbalized and that sort of stuff, to make sure that you understand what you're going to be looking at going forward, because it may not be as simple and straightforward as they want to continue to grow as you have grown in the past. And part of that, like for us, we knew that was going to be the case. That they were interested in our software as a platform for their business more so than as a revenue stream. Mm-hmm. So we knew we were kind of fundamentally changing the strategy and goals of the organization. I did not understand prior to that, I understood how that was going to impact me, how that would impact the broader team, not from a jobs situation or anything like that, but just from a motivation. So we had a culture that was very, very focused on growth. And when we took growth away as our primary mission, it created some cultural problems and headaches, where people were just like, what are we doing?
Sure.
That sort of thing. So it was, that part of it was very different.
Yeah. And then, you got through the acquisition, you've kind of done the whole enchilada as an entrepreneur at this point. You've got that's one of those infinity steps. You've gone through an acquisition. And then you turn around and you find another startup that you feel like you can help. So talk us through, first off, I'm curious, was there any sort of, I'm going to take some time off, I'm going to go travel the world, or what'd you do once you kind of got to that point where you thought?
Yeah. So, once I wrapped up my agreement, I did. I took some time off. I was planning on taking off more time than I ended up taking, but it didn't. It didn't take too long before I started getting pretty restless.
I think that's pretty common for entrepreneurs.
So I started looking around and really intended to kind of leave the vet space. Like I'd been in this space for a long time. You really felt like I'd seen as much of it as I wanted to see for a while. And so I was looking at a few different opportunities, and then Parasite System, which is based here in Lexington. Eric Houck, the founder over there, reached out to me. One of the challenges that they were having was integrating with veterinary practice management software. So he had reached out to me about getting some help with that. And, the conversation initially started with, hey, I'm not really looking to do anything. I'd be happy to give you some, consulting advice and that sort of thing. But then as I kind of learned more about what he had built and what they're working on, it's like, how much will you let me get involved? Like, I think you've got a really, really interesting, good thing going here. And it went from him asking me for help to me asking him, how much help will you let me give without driving you crazy?
It's very cool. Well, it sounds like we need to have Eric on the podcast to tell us more about Parasite Systems, but give us the high level on what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, so they have developed a patented process for and built a diagnostic analyzer to identify parasites and pathogens in biologic samples. So it's a platform technology that can do all different types. Right now we're focused on fecal, which no one does. There's no automated process for that. And the stuff that is out there right now is manual or reference labs. There's a couple of technologies that aren't great, but what makes Parasite kind of so different and so special is they use an antigen reaction to attach a fluorescein dye to parasites, and then shine UV light on it, makes it glow, fluoresce, and then an AI image recognition algorithm then identifies and counts those. So Eric does a great analogy of if you're trying to spot birds in a forest, everybody else is looking at the whole forest. They have to subsample to get down to look at each branch. They can't look at all the branches, so they can only find birds on specific ones. What we do is we make all the birds glow. You can take one picture and you can see them just glowing everywhere. So we've got a bunch of peer-reviewed papers, 14 peer-reviewed papers. The most recent one demonstrates that our largest competitor were about between 3 to 10x more sensitive than them. So it's a really kind of interesting use of an existing technology with the antigen reaction, and then combining it with the patented process of putting the fluorescein and then AI to count it, identify and count. So it's a really interesting and cool combination of those things. And, it does all of that sample prep included in about 6 minutes.
Wow.
So it's obviously something I'm a big fan of, but it's cool. We're getting ready to roll out our first heartworm and blood serum tests, and it's going to be an opportunity that I'm very excited about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've heard you talk in depth just around JP with the happy hour that we had. I mean, it does sound like a very, very exciting opportunity. So I'll be another fun one to track here for this ecosystem. Yeah, definitely need to get Eric on the podcast. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to just end on a note, just for Kentucky entrepreneurs, going through building Hippo Manager. One of the things that you talked about a lot was just relentless persistence as you kind of build your business. Talk about, kind of how you learned that through Hippo Manager and the importance of that as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So, I don't think you can overstate it enough. how bad it's going to be at times. And like, you just like got to make the decision to either keep going or not. There's probably several times that I know certainly, my wife and family weren't ready for me to throw in the towel, and rightfully so. I've had a lot of help and I've had a lot of good fortune that kind of helped get over those things. So like, I think it's something that you have to just kind of keep at and, take care of your people, take care of your customers and work hard. And like, I know that sounds kind of like trite, but like those things got us through quite a few difficult situations of like when we needed kind of extra help, we were able to find it because we kind of built that reputation as a company that we could do those things and get there. I'm a huge believer. I had a job in college. One summer I spent selling books door to door, which is a really great way to spend a summer when you're 19, in the age of the internet, selling books. But what it did teach me was basically the law of averages. Like if you identify what your success rate is, like for selling those books, if you did 30 demos, you would sell 2 of them, no matter what. Like it just was amazing. And Hippo was the same way. Parasite, helping them build their sales organization, is the same way. You find out what those numbers are, and then you're just like, if I got to talk to 60 people to sell one, and I want to sell 5, it's pretty easy math. I know what I got to do, and then you just iterate to drive that success percentage up. But I think understanding kind of those unit economics and pairing that with persistence was what has worked for me.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thanks so much for taking some time to sit down and tell us about your story, and congratulations on going through an acquisition. I know it's just exciting stuff. Excited to hear about it. So before we let you go, if you want to give any sort of plugs for Parasite Systems, where if somebody's listening and they know somebody that might be a potential customer, where should we send them to learn more? How can they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. This has been great. If anybody that's interested, it's parasitesystem.com. They can get that information. Also, you can reach out to me directly, either through LinkedIn or through the website, that sort of thing. I'd love to talk to anybody that's interested.
Cool. And that's Parasite spelled S-I-G-H-T?
Yeah, that's a good, it's a parasite, like that you see with,
cool.
And then system, no S at the end. So Parasite System.
Good deal. All right. We'll cut it there.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.